I'm Robert Timmons, and you're watching Weekly Words.
Stop me, oh, somebody stop me, stop me, stop me, please, somebody stop me, oh, somebody stop me, and Lord, if I'm doing it wrong, then please stop me.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Weekly Words. I hope that your week has been fulfilling and that this episode will continue to propel you through this week. This week, we're going to actually talk about the question, what do you do when you lose faith? So I am 100% sure that everybody watching and everybody in the world at some point or another has lost their faith, right? That can be losing their faith in God, their faith in themselves and in their purpose and their identity, faith in people or in a promise or anything. Any form of doubt that you experience that hinders your faith in something or someone. And whenever that happens, we start to just question who we are, when we question things that we used to know, when we question God and our purpose and His love for us and our love for Him and our love for people and all these other things, right? It happens to everyone. So whenever we get to that point when we're questioning everything and we have our doubts, what do we do? So first off, whenever you get to this point, I want to encourage you that you are not the only one, right? You are not the only one. You are not alone. Everybody at some point in their life has questioned their faith, has had doubt, has questioned their purpose or their identity or their love or someone else's love or God's purpose or something, whatever. They have lost their faith to some capacity. So whenever you feel this way, don't think that you're alone. Don't be ashamed because you're asking questions. Know that other people have experienced this too, and that it is natural and that it's going to happen from time to time in your life. The important part is knowing how to turn it around and find your faith and re-solidify your foundation so that you can move forward as opposed to being knocked down. All right? Second, you need to go back to the basics. Go back to the time when you first experienced your joy, you first discovered your purpose, or you first fell in love with God, or first learned about His love for you, right? And use those things and those times to help remind yourself now, solidify your foundation and overcome this obstacle of doubt. Okay, so for example, whenever I was in college and I was taking the higher levels of mathematics, calculus, differential equations, linear algebra, partial differential equations, statistics, whatever, there were times that I felt confused and perplexed and didn't know how to solve these problems, and I was stumped, right? And so I had doubt in my ability to solve them. What I did was I went back to the basics. I went back to the simple algebraic expressions, the simple addition and multiplication, the simple rules and laws and orders of operations. I went back to the simple derivatives and integration and re-solidified my understanding and foundation in those things and tried to see how I can apply them to the current problem at hand, right? And solve that, right? I went back to the basics to propel myself over this current obstacle that I was facing. And I feel like we have to do something similar in life. So if you've lost your faith in yourself and in your purpose, go back to the moment when you first experienced joy of you doing something, when you first knew that this was something that was going to stay in your life, something that was substantial, right? If you're doubting your love for someone or someone's love for you, go back to the moment when you first knew that you loved them. Right? If you've lost your faith in God and His love for you and His purpose for you, go back to the moment when you first learned about God's existence and His love for you and the purpose in your life that He had created you to have and the scriptures that taught you about that. Go back to that sermon, to that scripture, to that song, to that moment, and re-solidify your foundation so that you can better understand God's love for you now, right? Because it's only grown, right? It's only grown. So for me, whenever I question my purpose or my life significance, I think back to when I first started writing poetry. And that was in 2011. And at that time, which is still the case today, I wrote to help me process through emotional things and spiritual things and physical things or interpersonal things. It was my way of artistic expression to get over the humps of life, right? And as that has expanded over the years, I've come to understand and realize that poetry is always going to be a part of my life, right? All the way until the day that I die. Like, it's not going anywhere, because poetry isn't just something that I do. It's an extension of my very body. It's like my sixth sense, right? Of being able to articulate what I'm feeling and experiencing. So, and it's a talent that God has given me and that He's told me to utilize. And so all the times when I question my purpose and what tomorrow's going to bring and what's coming next and my job, all those different things, I think back to poetry and how that is something that God has given me to use and understand my purpose. Like, my purpose, part of my purpose is rooted in poetry and my artistic expression. And then whenever I question God and his purpose for me, or his love for me, or his strength in protecting me, or I think about anything negative about him, I go back to certain scriptures and I think about how the scriptures are a promise to me, a promise about his love, a promise about his character, a promise about my purpose, a promise about what he's going to provide for me, right? Or a promise of his strength, a promise of his protection, a reassurance of his strength in me. All those different things, my strength in him, right? So all those different things are a reminder for me. And so I encourage you to find a couple of scriptures that you can go back to as well. So I'll read off some of the scriptures for me. I'm just gonna say what they are. I'm not gonna read them. Some of them we've actually talked about here on Weekly Words. So scriptures like Ephesians 6:10, Colossians 3:23, 1 Corinthians 9 verses 24 through 27, Psalm 121:3, Psalm 34:17. 1 Corinthians 13:4 through 7, Isaiah 4:30 and 31, and 2 Timothy 1:7. So like I said, all these scriptures are showcasing God's strength, God's promise, God's love, God's character, God's protection, and it's things that help me get through those doubtful times. So I encourage you, all of you, to find scriptures that do the same thing for you. And if it's some of the same ones as these, that's fine too. So whenever you get to a point in your life where you feel like you've lost your faith in someone or something, right? Remember two things. One, don't feel ashamed or embarrassed, because you're not the only one. Everybody has experienced that doubt at some point or another, right? And you might even experience again in your life. And two, go back to the basics. Go back to the things where you first found your joy, you first found your purpose, you first found your love for God. And remind yourself of those things and apply it to the current problem so that you can get over the obstacle of doubt and that you can be propelled forward as opposed to being knocked down. So just like every other week, I'm going to ask you guys a couple of questions, and I encourage you again to talk them over with an accountability partner and see what areas in your life you can grow in. All right? So question 1. Have you ever lost your faith in someone or something? That can be currently or in the past. Have you ever lost your faith in someone or something? Question 2. What did you do to get it back? What did you do to get it back? Question 3. What is your favorite scripture or scriptures? What is your favorite scripture or scriptures? Hey everybody, thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Weekly Words. I hope you thoroughly enjoyed it. If you have any suggestions for topics for me to talk about in the future, feel free to email me at weeklywordsrt@gmail.com. All right, I'll talk to you later. Have a great week.
Oh, somebody stop me, please, somebody stop me, oh, somebody stop me, and Lord, if I'm doing it wrong, then please stop me.